It is finally here, The Passenger by Cormac McCarthy. This is unequivocally the greatest literary event of the year and of recent memory, and rumors about this novel have been dangling in the ether for over 2 decades. And since I have been waiting with unbearable anticipation for this novel for 7 years, I will be putting my future video projects on the back burner for a few more months, so I have the time and mental fortitude to meditate over and breathe in this possible swan song from my favorite author of all time. In celebration of this publication, I am now going to read and give a mini analysis of the first paragraph from The Passenger. So behold the first paragraph from The Passenger. It had snowed lightly in the night, and her frozen hair was gold and crystalline, and her eyes were frozen, cold, and hard as stones. One of her yellow boots had fallen off and stood in the snow beneath her. The shape of her coat lay dusted in the snow where she'd dropped it, and she wore only a white dress, and she hung among the bare gray poles of the winter trees with her head bowed and her hands turned slightly outward, like those of certain ecumenical statues whose attitude asks that their history be considered, that the deep foundation of the world be considered where it has its being in the sorrow of her creatures. The hunter knelt and stogged his rifle upright in the snow beside him, and took off his gloves and let them fall, and folded his hands one upon the other. He thought that he should pray, but he'd no prayer for such a thing. He bowed his head. "Tower of ivory," he said. "House of gold." He knelt there for a long time. When he opened his eyes, he saw a small shape half buried in the snow, and he leaned and dusted away the snow and picked up a gold chain that held a steel key, a white gold ring. He slipped them into the pocket of his hunting coat. He'd heard the wind in the night. The wind's work. A trash can clattering over the bricks behind his house. The snow blowing out there in the forest in the dark. He looked up into those cold enameled eyes glinting blue in the weak winter light. She had tied her dress with a red sash so that she'd be found. Some bit of color in the scrupulous desolation. On this Christmas day, this cold and barely spoken Christmas day. Just in this single introductory paragraph, McCarthy paints a potent and profuse painting filled with chilling and evocative meanings. Firstly, the structure of the paragraph. The scene unfurls like a cinematic tapestry. The first concrete image is of golden hair and stone-cold eyes, and then the yellow boot, and the shape of a coat. And finally, the white-dressed body hung from the tree of winter in the form of a Christian icon, it implies. Think of the Virgin Mary, head bowed, and the hunter who can only bow under the Virgin Mary. And suddenly the phantom wind. Now this is where things get worse. Second, there's the sound of the prose. Listen to the harsh and brisk streaks of sharp ash and isks and e's and I vowels that begin with the clash of the trash, which leads to the horrors of the scene in full. You feel as though you are there in that freezing waste, that shattering sense of the ice of the cold piercing the arteries and veins. And the music of the mono and dissyllabic then lengthens to the onerous phrase of scrupulous desolation, which thus emulates the emptiness of what is left of that barren scene. 1 second, the prose connects you with the stinging coldness of that situation, only to immediately leave you empty. And third, the tragic parallels of the dead Alicia to the refuse of the inconsequential. When McCarthy introduces the hard ash sound, it is with the falling trash can, and when it is pointed out that Alicia wore a red sash, so she would be found after death. The sound of the trash with sash thus connects the remains of the human with that of the leftovers of the swollen meats and drinks and undistinguished sludge everyone throws out to fester and foul the fading of the light. But the worst comes at the very end of the paragraph, when McCarthy twists the knife even deeper. The death happens on Christmas Day. The myth of the birth of the baby Jesus, the light of the world, is thus superseded by the suicide of the Virgin Mother. The opening to this book is bleaker than anything I have ever read. Opening of another bleak novel. Like, this is bleaker than the openings to Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon, Nathaniel West's Miss Lonely Hearts, and even McCarthy's own The Road. But holy crap, is this book firing me up. And this is why Cormac McCarthy is my favorite author, and there's no contest. You won't get this from the novels that were written in a fortnight by hacks who don't take literature or the importance of storytelling seriously. Anyone can sit down and type a fifth-rate piece of not even worth toilet paper garbage in a few days. But not McCarthy. McCarthy takes not just years, but decades composing his works. Because he wants us to think, to meditate, to struggle with what it means to be human. And until next time, good night.